Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please go to the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I will now place in the chat room. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please either write in the chat room or turn on your microphone and say hi. We'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guest is Dan Siegel, a jazz pianist, composer, as well as an educator at Miracosta College. Dan's new album, Unity, will be the subject of tonight's conversation. And welcome.
Thank you, Simeon. Pleasure to be here.
Dan, so tell us a little bit about where you come from, how your musical tastes were formed, and why you decided to become a jazz pianist, composer, and educator.
Well, I suppose the journey starts a long, long time ago at this point. I started taking piano lessons when I was 8, um, and it was really my mother who was the instigator. She wanted me to, play the piano and become musical. My father was actually not in favor of me becoming a musician, but he kind of winked. Every time I left for a gig. But so I started taking piano lessons at the age of 8, and of course at that time, rock and roll was on the scene, and the the what made it, I think, my journey unique is that I had an excellent teacher. My first piano teacher was unusual in the sense that most, I'd say, traditional classical teachers, you work on repertoire. You learn to play pieces, but you never tear them apart and look at what's inside. And my teacher made me focus equally on the structure of the music. We focused on theory. She had these weekly meetings with all of her students, and we'd meet in her living room, and she'd serve Kool-Aid and cookies, and she had a big blackboard up there, and we talk about chord structure. No one does that, especially when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. You don't study harmony. And so by the time I was 11, after about 3 years of studying with her, I had a very strong kind of foundation, understanding of how music, how notes fit together. Um, my older brother was a guitar player, and he was maybe not such an atypical older brother, but One day he came home and I was playing his guitar, and he grabbed it and pulled it out of my hands, and he got in my face and he said, "You will never be any good at this." And of course, that just motivated me to like, so I started playing the guitar. Um, I quit taking piano lessons and focused on playing the guitar. And I was in a band that we played. We were a professional band at I was 12, and I think that's partially why my hearing is so shot. That I've been doing it for such a long time. And you know, so I was playing guitar. Was in a band for several years. As time went on, I mean, I've been in a band forever, but I got a job because of my background in understanding of theory and harmony. I got a job teaching at a local music store when I was 14. I think I was making $15 an hour, which in 1968 was a lot of money. And I was teaching, because I understood at that point guitar and piano, I could teach people. And I ended up teaching bands, you know, like, okay, bass player, play the root, you do this, you do, and it was kind of unusual. Um, so I've been a teacher for a very long time, but you know, it wasn't my main focus, and been playing music for a very long time as well. When I was 18 in high school, I have a very good friend, he's still friends. I saw him a couple months ago in my hometown. We get together occasionally. But on my 18th birthday, he gave me four records: the Bill Evans album, Chick Corea, Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage, and then he gave me a Tony Williams record, which I didn't get at all. The other three records, he said, "I'm just loaning these to you, and I want you to like study them." I ended up listening to the Chick Corea record every day for a year, and Bill Evans and Herbie record probably almost as often. And on my 19th birthday, he said, "You know, I just loaned you those records, but you haven't given them back to me. So for your 19th birthday, I'm going to give you those records." Made a huge difference because all of a sudden it was, I've been like playing like, you know, rock, you know, folk. It was, harmony was very simple. And all of a sudden it was like, what are these guys doing? They're doing something different. Um, and there was a single jazz teacher in my hometown of Eugene, Oregon, and I started studying with him. And that was kind of an enlightening process as well, because he showed me how to extend the chord structures to upper scale, upper division, whatever you would call that, harmony, where you start adding ninths and thirteenths and 11s. And so everything I was playing then, I started extending the harmony. And I was still playing in a rock band. And, you know, I remember this one rehearsal that we were playing, and we were playing Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, you know, da 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 da. It was pretty much a 1-4-5 song. And everything I was playing was a ninth chord. Well, if you look at the harmony, that just doesn't work. And didn't know enough to know that it didn't work. The guitar player kept looking over me and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, but I learned these chords and I'm going to use them." Eventually, I realized that, you know, you can't use ninth chords when you're, depending on if you're in, you know, minor mode or whatever. And but it was sort of a curious thing. And from that point on, I was hooked on harmony, and that's, you know, I've been in a band ever since. You know, extending my knowledge and I still consider myself a student. I still study. I still look at scores. It's, you know, really, if you're interested in this stuff, you just, it's kind of a lifelong journey.
Okay.
You
And
know,
Dan, yeah, so I'm hoping that you'll give me the contact information of your friend who gave you those records, because he sounds like an awesome person. Um, so listen now. Let's listen now to Defining Moment, please. This is another album, another track from the album. So, Dan, tell us now about this new album, Unity, and how it fits into this whole what you were saying about, being in this living room of your teacher, learning harmony, this collaboration, working in a band. Tell us about these five incredible guitarists that you tapped to play on this album. What's Unity all about? How did you put together? How did you know I want to play with this musician?
The process of composition and then recording are like almost two separate worlds. And when you start writing, you don't, it's like a blank slate. It's like a painter looking at it, a canvas, and it's totally open. It's like, what are you going to do? And you start with the germ of an idea and you see how it develops. Sometimes the ideas develop into something, sometimes they don't. You don't really have an idea of what the composition is going to be until it's kind of formulated. And I mean, at least that's the way I write. And I'm sort of a obsessive about the details. So I might start a song. It takes months and months for me to finish anything, and it's always like I can change this one chord. My problem is going back to my studying of harmony. I've never met a chord I didn't like, and it's like I think I can stick another chord in here. Well, maybe it doesn't need it. I'm going to put it in there anyway. So I tend to like overwrite sometimes, and then I have to kind of pull back and say, what can you thin out? When I finished all these compositions and I was like listening to them, um, I decided the first thing you do is basic tracks. Who's going to play bass and drums? And I'd worked with Oscar Seaton 20 years ago prior, and I ended up like going back and listening to that record that I did with Oscar, and I thought, why haven't I called Oscar since then? And the story goes that, Oscar called me. We were doing a gig somewhere, and he called me, and he just broken up with his girlfriend, and he called me, like it's like the drums need to be set up. We're doing a live gig, and he lives an hour away from where the gig was, and I called him, and I said, Oscar, where are you? He picks up the phone, which is you don't want to hear that, and he goes, oh man, he goes, I'm not coming. My girlfriend just left me, and I'm like, Oscar, get in the car. Well, he ended up anyway. That kind of like bummed me out. So I didn't call Oscar for 20 years. And I was listening to that record and I said, man, he plays so good. I'm going to call Oscar. So I called him. He goes, man, love to do it. And he goes, who are you going to hire for bass? And I said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who would be right. And he goes, there's this guy that I'm working with in Terrence Blanchard's band. And his name is DJ Ginyard, and I'm like, okay, well, let me think about it. Because I've never done this before, but obviously I trusted Oscar's taste. I know he's a fabulous musician. So I started doing a search and I found this little YouTube video of DJ, and I was like, man, this guy is different. I was like, hire him. I've never done that before, like not even knowing the guy. He's just like the sweetest guy in the world. Both of these guys are like, 6'4", so we took a picture in the studio, and I'm like, hey, I'm down here. They're huge guys, just fabulous players. And from then it was like, I kind of figured like, I'm going to call all these old guitar players that I know. And that's where I got, I ended up, Alan Hines I've worked with for a long time. And it's been so long since I worked with all of the other guys that I just went down the list and hired a couple different people for every song. And it was a really pleasant and inspiring experience to work with these guys. Everybody's like getting a little older like me. So these guys have tons of experience that they bring. It was a great experience, in the studio. So.
Okay, let's listen to another song. This is Free Spirit. So, Dan, this brings us to the philosophical part of our conversation that I know everyone looks forward to every week. Dan, in the introduction to his famous music treatise, Johann Joachim Quantz writes, and this is my translation from the original German, quote, our forefathers believed that music could only be learned through instruction. Learning the rules of basso continuo were not the last, but the very first step on the classical music journey. Back then, there were only a few quote unquote composers, and they all took that journey to heart. Today, however, every Joe Schmo who can make any sound on an instrument believes that he has also mastered music composition. That's why every day so many miscarriages are born into our world. So it should surprise no one if the public considers classical music more repulsive than attractive. Only through thorough instruction combined with hard work, effort, and research, I tell you, can an exceptional degree of musicianship be attained. End quote. Dan, when we first met, I asked if I should introduce you as a pianist and composer. Without hesitation, you told me I'm also an educator. As an educator, you write, quote, my goal in the classroom is to give students the necessary tools that will enable them to emerge as new music industry leaders. Several of my students have launched professional careers after completing courses at Miracosta College. For me, that's the ultimate accomplishment, end quote. Dan, it was 1750 when Johann Joachim Quantz wrote his opinion about classical music. In 2024, does Dan Siegel agree with Quantz? What does Dan believe his students need to do in order to make exceptional classical music?
Wow, that's a conversation that I actually had last night, in my classes, and it's it's difficult. And I don't do I agree with Johann Quantz? Yes. Um, there's a book, Malcolm Gladwell. He's written a lot of books, but he wrote a book, and I think it was called 10,000 Hours, where he did interviews with a variety of people that were specialists in whatever field: tennis players, musicians, artists. And um, after he interviewed all these people, he asked them, like, how long have you been working at this skill to perfect it? And it turned out to be 10,000 hours was like the average, which if you extrapolate that over years, it was like 10 years, 4 hours every day for 10 years, right? It takes a commitment. And one of the things I tell my students, without trying to sound like an old fuddy duddy, that if you are, if you want to be good at something, get a teacher, study privately, make a commitment to it. Don't come out of the hole for months. Focus, commit. That's the only way to get good at anything. And I think, we live in this YouTube generation where the younger people, look at videos and say, "Oh, look at that guy. He didn't study. He's a millionaire. He's got 1 billion streams or whatever. I can do it too." And in reality, to really establish any kind of longevity and a real viable career, you have to pay your dues. You have to put in the time to study. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete, right? Or, I mean, we just saw the Olympics. These people don't have social lives because they committed to what they're doing. It's the same thing if you want to be a good musician. There is no shortcut. Um, so, sometimes I feel a little frustrated that I can't get that across to people. They want to, like, do I really want to spend 2 hours in a practice room every day, or 3 hours? And the answer is no. Everybody wants to, just like, I play the piano and I play the guitar and I play the drums. I get so many of my students that like play all these things. I say, have you ever played with a band? Have you played the drums with a band? No. Have you ever taken a lesson? No. And I said, you're not a drummer. And then I like send them out to the drum kit. I say, play a groove. And it's like, there is no groove. And it's like, no, I don't think you're a drummer, you know? So it's kind of the other aspect of, I think, teaching in today's world is that, and just like that quote that I said, that, um, the reality is you want to make it in the entertainment business, you want to make it as a musician. It's not easy. Somebody told me it's like the music business is not for wimps. It's not, because a lot of people will say, no, whatever you're doing is wrong. No one's gonna ever buy it, you know, um, give up now, I mean, you're gonna get a lot of negative feedback, and it takes a certain inner strength and a wall of metal to protect yourself and focus on your goals. So it's really not easy. And I see that as my job to like instruct them that, if you choose this, I can't talk you out of it. I had piano teachers that I had a classical piano teacher when I was in college, and I'd be practicing in between before he would come in, and he'd come in and he'd make fun of me because I wanted to play jazz, and I'd be kind of playing jazz, and he'd say, what are you going to do? Get a job in a bar? And my response was, I hope so. And he's like, he looked down on that. But, right, I mean, I kind of ignored I understood what he was, more Bach, more Mozart, right? I'm like, yeah, because I was trying to even my technique out. But it's hard. It's extremely difficult. And now, there's so much saturation in the market, everybody can look at a couple of YouTube videos and think that they play an instrument. We know the truth. It's more difficult, and it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of luck, in fact, to succeed.
Okay. Let's listen to our final track of the evening. This is Streetwise. Okay. Um, so we have before the last question, um, do we have a message here? No, no message. Are there any questions, or would anyone like to say anything to Dan? Yes, Dr. Davis.
Can I ask where you're from, Dan?
Um, I was born in Seattle and lived most of my life in Eugene, Oregon.
Oh my God. have a
Yeah.
bit of a New York accent at times. I was just wondering.
Is that right? I never
Yeah.
heard that before, you know?
Keep
Well,
up the good work. I like your music. Very nice.
well, thank you very much.
So
I do see a question
thanks,
up
Dr.
here in the
Davis.
chat from Jason that I didn't answer about the guitar players. Guitar players, Alan Hines plays on a couple tracks, Rob Bacon, Mike Miller, Michael Thompson. Who did I leave out? Dean Parks is the other guy. So there's like five just fabulous studio guys that have played with an assortment of great players, people that I've known for the last, I was looking at when I started doing this, it's like 45 years ago. So it's kind of like, a long time. So.
Okay, we have a question from Steve and Lori.
Yeah. Dan, any chance that you're going to play live anywhere anytime soon?
The next couple gigs are there's a gig in San Diego at a club. What is it? It's called Humphreys Backstage. It's a little club in San Diego, and then I'm doing the jazz festival the next week on that's October 6th, and then the next weekend, October 13th, at the Catalina Jazz Festival, which is kind of a smooth jazz ish festival, but it's always fun. It's a little bit crazy to try to get over to the island, and but once you're there, it's like it's 20 miles from LA, and it feels like you're in a different country, which is really cool.
I'm glad you're doing that again. I saw you there a few years ago when you did it. It was great.
Well,
It was
thank
great.
you, thank you.
So how could we find out about the Humphreys? Is that on
It's
publicized
if you
somewhere?
yeah, if you go to my website, there's a link under, I don't know what I call it, itinerary or something.
Okay,
And
cool.
then, yeah, if you go there, itinerary, and there's the event, and you
Nice.
can click on it, and it'll take you to the website.
Awesome.
Cool.
Can't wait to see it.
So who do you like to listen
Oh,
to?
What was that?
Who do you like to listen to?
Boy, I find how it's like the algorithms will, when you're like say uh, on Spotify or something where you like listen to it takes you like from one thing to another based on your whatever you choose. Um, I ended up I still listen to boy, there's some people that pop up a lot. Um, I still listen to like Keith Jarrett and Bill Evans at pianists. Herbie comes up. Chick, I mean, I've been listening to those guys for a long time. And in between those great guys, I mean, I listen to a lot of, you know, popular music. I teach a music composition class, and I try to like explain how simple most of the popular music is. And so, in order to understand it, I listen to why these songs are like so contagious and why people like them. And so, and also, I have to admit, I have a 10-year-old granddaughter who, whenever she's in the car, it's like Taylor Swift. So I've been forced to listen to Taylor Swift. And, the music isn't so bad. It's actually, it's well done, and you can't deny that. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I would choose other music to listen to in the car, and it's always like from one. Now it's Olivia Rodrigo. She does listen to like Harry Styles as well, but it's kind of like you're forced to listen to that kind of demographic, which I try to make it a learning experience. Like, okay, what is it that you know 10 to 14-year-old girls are attracted to? It doesn't apply to my life, but I get it. I will say that.
okay. So thank you so much for those questions. Last question of the evening will be then, what do you wish those who listen to this album, Dan?
Well, let's see. I guess I would just hope that it provides a little bit of amusement, entertainment, and a kind of, if you get it, I tend to write, every song kind of is like a story or a feel. I mean, that's just how I write. Um, and, and some people get it and some people, may not. I think that this album is a little bit more groove oriented because of just the rhythm section, the way they play. And then just hopefully, I didn't want it to be heavy. I'm kind of, the world is heavy enough. You look at the news and it's hard to like, it can really be pretty depressing I'm just like, I wanted a little bit of release and relief and hopefully it does that, it takes the listener a little bit, removes them from the world for a brief period of time.
And may I recommend that you play it in the car for your 10-year-old granddaughter? So,
I might add that the previous record during COVID, she did the artwork for when she was 5. And so I was most happy about that record. It was during COVID, so everybody was like separated and we were all wearing masks. And it was a really dark time. And the record kind of, when I listened to it, it was like, wow, it reflects the time. But she's a pretty good sport.
okay. Thank you so very much to Dan Siegel.
Thank you, Simeon.
And how we can stay in touch with Dan. Again, his website is easy, dansiegelmusic.com. I've already put it in the chat room. And people can reach out to you here, Dan?
Yes, they can. There's a contact thing which goes directly to me.
Fantastic. And also, I wanted to underline that Dan is teaching there at Mira Costa College. He's one of the full-time music faculty. They've got a music technology program and another program. We'll put it in the chat room in a moment. It's miracosta.edu. And anyways, check that out. So I'm putting that there. And so I'd like to show people what's coming up next week on Vienna Live. At any time, you can always check out what's coming up at www.simeonmora.com. We also have a Friday greeting, personal greeting from me that comes out. If you'd like that, you can just register your email, put your email, and then click subscribe. Coming up on Wednesday is Greg Scaff, Re-Up. Greg Scaff has been a leading guitarist in the NYC jazz scene for over 4 decades now. He joins us for a listen to his new trio album, Re-Up, featuring bassist Agano Aguego and young drumming sensation Jonathan Barber. Let's welcome Greg to our show, and he'll introduce us to authentic New York jazz. That's next Wednesday. Again, Greg Scaff, Re-Up. And all information, again, is available at www.simeonmora.com. Thank you so very much to Dan Siegel. Thank you to Victoria and Frederick Mulligan, as well as Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Thanks to my cousin Mike, a marketer from Layer App. If you're an engineer or an architect, they have a really cool tool you should check out. Thanks also to Mary Schlesinger for the lovely Viennese library you see behind me. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From Irvine, California, and New London, New Hampshire, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Thank you.